Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to walk through the most important rules in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FR, that every beginner in government contracting absolutely must know. Whether you're a new small business owner looking to win your first federal contract, or a professional just entering the acquisition world, this presentation will give you the foundational knowledge you need to navigate the federal marketplace with confidence. Let's get started. In the next few minutes, we're going to cover 8 essential areas of the Federal Acquisition Regulation. We'll start by explaining what the FAR actually is and why it matters. Then we'll walk through the critical dollar thresholds that determine how the government buys things. From there, we'll dive into the most important FAR parts that every beginner needs to understand. The foundational rules in Parts 1 and 2, competition requirements in Part 6, contractor qualifications in Part 9, simplified buy-in under Part 13, negotiated contracting in Part 15, and finally the small business programs and contract clauses in Parts 19 and 52. By the end of this session, you'll have a clear roadmap of the federal acquisition landscape. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, is the rulebook for all federal purchasing. Think of it as the constitution of government contracting. It was first enacted in 1984 to create one unified, standardized set of procurement rules across all executive branch agencies. Before the FR, each agency had its own rules, creating chaos for contractors working with multiple agencies. The FIR has 53 parts covering everything from definitions to ethics to contract types to small business programs. The federal government spends over $750 billion annually on goods and services, making it the world's largest buyer. Every dollar of that spending flows through the FAR's rules. The FR's core vision is clear: deliver the best value product or service on time while maintaining the public's trust, ensuring fair competition, and fulfilling legal requirements. It's not just bureaucracy. It's a system designed to protect taxpayers. The FAR is organized into 53 parts, but don't let that number intimidate you. The parts are grouped into logical categories. Parts 1 through 4 cover general rules and definitions. Parts 5 through 8 address competition and acquisition planning. Parts 9 through 12 deal with contractor qualifications and contract types. Parts 13 through 18 cover the actual acquisition procedures. Parts 19 through 28 address special categories like small business and foreign acquisition. And Parts 29 through 53 cover contract management, clauses, and administration. As a beginner, you do not need to memorize all 53 parts. What you need is a working knowledge of the 7 highlighted parts on the right side of this slide. Master those, and you'll be well equipped for most federal contracting situations you'll encounter early in your career. One of the most important things a beginner must understand is that the rules of buying change based on how much money is involved. This is called the threshold pyramid. At the very bottom, the simplest level, is the micro purchase threshold. As of October 2025, that's $15,000. Below that amount, a contracting officer can buy directly without any competitive process. They can literally just hand over a government purchase card. The next level is the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, or SAT, now set at $350,000. Below the SAT, the government uses simplified procedures from Part 13. Much faster, less paperwork. Above the SAT, up to $9 million for commercial products and services, streamlined commercial item rules apply under FAR 13.5. For anything above the SAT requiring full competition, formal acquisition procedures kick in: RFPs, best value evaluations, and source selection. And for contracts over $2 million, the government can require you to provide certified cost or pricing data under the Truth in Negotiations Act. Knowing which threshold applies to your opportunity determines everything about how you respond and what the government will expect from you. Before you can navigate the FAR, you need to understand its foundation, Parts 1 and 2. Part 1 establishes the entire system. It tells you why the FAR exists: to create one uniform rulebook for all executive agencies, and what the government's overarching vision is: deliver best value, maintain public trust, and follow the law. One critical point from Part 1 for beginners: agencies cannot just make up their own rules. Any deviation from the FAR must go through a formal approval process. So when someone tells you, we do it differently here, they need to have that deviation on file. Part 2 is the FAR's dictionary. It defines every important term used throughout the regulation. This matters enormously because federal contracting has very precise meanings for words. For example, a contracting officer, often called the CO, is the only person with legal authority to bind the government to a contract. Not the program manager, not the technical expert, only the CO. And knowing the dollar definition of micro purchase threshold and simplified acquisition threshold determines which entire set of rules apply to any given purchase. Always check Part 2 before assuming you know what a FAR term means. Part 6 of the FAR is built on one powerful principle. The federal government must compete its contracts. Full and open competition is not a preference, it's the legal default. Looking at the chart on the left, you can see that roughly 58% of federal contract awards go through full and open competition. Another 24% are set-asides reserved for small businesses, which is still a form of competition, just among a restricted pool. Only about 11% are true sole source awards, and those require a formal written justification. Why does this matter to you as a contractor? Because it means the government has a legal obligation to give you a fair shot at competing for most contracts. If you see an opportunity that appears wired for a specific vendor that may actually be illegal, and you can protest it. Now, there are 7 statutory exceptions where the government can limit or eliminate competition. These include situations like only one source being available, genuine urgency, or national security concerns. But these exceptions require a written justification and approval document called a J&A, which is publicly posted on SAM. Gov as a beginner, your takeaway from Part 6 is this. Competition protects you. It levels the playing field. Know your rights to compete. Before the government can award you a contract, they must determine that you are a responsible contractor. Part 9 defines exactly what that means. There are 7 standards of responsibility. As a contractor, you need to demonstrate that you have the financial resources to perform, that you can meet the delivery schedule, that you have a good past performance record, that you have the necessary technical skills and equipment, that you maintain strong business ethics, that you comply with labor laws, and that you have adequate internal controls. Now, the single most critical action item from Part 9 for any beginner is this. Register in sam.gov. That's the system for award management. Without an active SAM registration, the government literally cannot pay you. No SAM, no contract. This is non-negotiable and must be renewed every year. The dark side of Part 9 is the debarment and suspension rules. If the government determines a contractor has engaged in fraud, criminal activity, or seriously poor performance, they can be debarred, kicked out of the federal marketplace for up to 3 years. Suspension is a temporary exclusion that takes effect immediately while an investigation is pending. Before any award, the contracting officer checks the excluded parties list in sam.gov. Make sure you're clean, registered, and current. Part 13 covers the simplified acquisition procedures. And for small businesses, this is often where you'll win your first federal contracts. Simplified acquisition applies to purchases at or below the simplified acquisition threshold, $350,000. The goal is speed and efficiency. Less paperwork, faster awards, and more flexibility for both buyers and sellers. The process flows in 5 steps. The agency identifies a need, issues a simple solicitation, which can even be verbal in some cases, conducts basic market research, makes an award decision based on best value at a fair and reasonable price, and documents it with a purchase order or simplified contract. There are several key tools under simplified acquisition. Purchase cards are the fastest. For micro purchases under $15,000, a contracting officer or authorized buyer can essentially swipe a government credit card. No competition required. Blanket purchase agreements, or BPAs, are particularly powerful for small businesses. These are like charge accounts the government sets up with pre-qualified vendors. Once you have a BPA, agencies can call on you repeatedly without going through a full competition every time. And if you're on the GSA multiple award schedule, orders under the SAT threshold can be placed extremely quickly. Getting on a GSA schedule should be an early goal for many small businesses. Part 15 governs negotiated contracting. This is what most people picture when they hear the words government contract. This is the request for proposal, or RFP world. When a procurement exceeds the simplified acquisition threshold, or when the government needs something complex that can't be bought off a simple price list, they issue an RFP and evaluate competing proposals. The life cycle has 6 key stages. The agency issues the RFP. Offerers, that's you, submit proposals by the deadline. The government evaluates all proposals against stated criteria. For competitive range acquisitions, the government may hold discussions to clarify or improve proposals. Then offerers submit final proposal revisions. And finally, the government makes a best value award decision. That phrase, best value, is crucial. It does not mean lowest price. Look at the chart on the right. In a typical RFP, technical approach carries the most weight, often 35% or more. Past performance comes next. Price is important, but an outstanding technical proposal can win over a slightly lower priced competitor. As a beginner, the key lessons from Part 15 are: follow the RFP instructions exactly, address every evaluation factor specifically, demonstrate your technical approach clearly, and always use concrete examples from your past performance. Part 19 is one of the most important parts of the FAR for small businesses, and it can be your single greatest competitive advantage. The federal government has a statutory goal to award at least 23% of all prime contract dollars to small businesses. That means agencies are actively looking for qualified small businesses to award contracts to. But small business isn't a monolith. There are several specialized programs that create even more focused opportunities. The 8A Business Development Program, run by the SBA, is a 9-year program for socially and economically disadvantaged small business owners. One of its most powerful features is the ability to receive sole source contracts, meaning no competition, up to $5.5 million for services and $8.5 million for manufacturing. Hub Zone businesses get a 10% price preference in competitions and access to set-aside contracts if they maintain 35% of their workforce from historically underutilized business zones. Women-owned small businesses get set-asides in specific NAICS codes where WOSBs are underrepresented in federal contracting. And service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, SDVOSBs, have significant opportunities, especially with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The rule of 2 is the trigger for all set-asides. If there are at least 2 qualified small businesses that can perform the work at a fair market price, the contracting officer must set it aside. Part 52 of the FR is what makes a government contract legally unique from a commercial contract. It contains hundreds of standardized provisions and clauses that automatically flow into your contract. And here's the critical point. They're binding, even if you never read them. Contracting officers often incorporate clauses by reference, meaning they list just the clause number without printing the full text. But you are legally obligated to comply with every word of every reference clause. Ignorance is not a defense. Let me walk you through the 8 clauses on this slide that beginners absolutely must know. SAM registration, Clause 5, 2.204-7, means you must stay registered in sam.gov throughout the entire contract period, not just at award. Clause 52.212-4 sets the standard terms and conditions for commercial item contracts. If you're selling a commercial product or service, know this clause. The Equal Opportunity Clauses, 52.222-26 and 52.222-36, require affirmative action and non-discrimination in employment. These apply to most contracts over $10,000. The rights in data clause can be a shock to small businesses. When you develop data or intellectual property under a government contract, the government typically gets broad rights to use it. The disputes clause establishes the formal process for resolving disagreements, and you must exhaust the administrative process before going to court. And the default clause for fixed price contracts means if you fail to perform, the the government can terminate you and potentially hold you liable for reprocurement costs. Read this one very carefully. Now let's bring it all together. The acquisition lifecycle is the end-to-end process that every federal contract goes through, from the moment the agency recognizes a need to the final closeout of the contract. There are 7 phases, and the FIR governs every single one of them. Phase 1 is requirements planning. The agency identifies what they need and conducts market research. That's where small businesses can get on the radar early. Phase 2 is acquisition planning, where the agency decides on the acquisition strategy, contract type, and timeline. Phase 3 is solicitation development. The RFP, invitation for bids, or request for quotation gets written and posted publicly on SAM. Gov. This is when you find the opportunity and start preparing your response. Phase 4 is proposal evaluation, where the government scores your proposal against the stated evaluation criteria. Phase 5 is award and notification. The contracting officer makes the final decision and awards the contract. Unsuccessful offerers have the right to a debriefing to understand why they didn't win, and potentially to protest if they believe something was wrong. Phase 6, contract administration, is where performance actually happens. Your invoices are reviewed, deliverables are inspected, and the contracting officer representative monitors compliance. And Phase 7 is closeout, final audit, records retention, and the formal end of the contract. Understanding this life cycle helps you position your business at the right stage, long before the RFP is even released. Let me be direct with you. These are the mistakes I see beginners make over and over again in federal contracting. Learning about them now can save you months of frustration and thousands of dollars. Mistake number 1. Letting your SAM.gov registration lapse. This is the most common and most avoidable error. A lapsed registration means no award, no payment, and potentially a contract in jeopardy. Set a reminder 90 days before it expires. Every year, non-negotiable. Mistake 2, ignoring past performance. Past performance doesn't build itself. You have to actively request your Contractor Performance Assessment Reports, or CPARs, collect references, and document your results. Start from contract day 1. Mistake 3, only looking at unrestricted competitions. If you qualify for AA, WOSB, HubZone, or SDVOSB programs, you're leaving money on the table by not targeting set-aside contracts. Mistake 4, not reading the full RFP. The instructions in Section L and the evaluation criteria in Section M are the blueprint for your winning proposal. Ignore them at your peril. Mistake 5, underpricing to win. In a fixed price contract, if costs run over, you absorb the loss. Price your work realistically and document your pricing rationale. And mistake 6, the one most contractors skip, is not requesting a debriefing after a loss. You have the right to a debrief. Use it. It's free intelligence that will sharpen your next proposal. And that brings us to the most important slide in this entire presentation. You now have a solid foundation in the FR. You understand what it is, how it's structured, the critical dollar thresholds, competition requirements, contractor qualifications, small business programs, mandatory contract clauses, and the full acquisition lifecycle. But knowledge alone doesn't win contracts. Strategy, positioning, and execution do. That's where Neybor Consulting comes in. We help small businesses like yours navigate the federal marketplace, from getting your SAM registration right, to developing winning proposals, to obtaining small business certifications like 8A, HubZone, and WOSB. Our consultants have deep FAR expertise and real-world contracting experience. We know what agencies are looking for because we've been on both sides of the table. If you're serious about winning federal contracts, we invite you to book a free consultation with our team. Visit us at www.neyborconsulting.com, that's Neybor consulting.com, and click Book a Consultation. We'd love to help you turn today's knowledge into tomorrow's contract award. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Are there any questions?